Hi, I'm Laura Hendrickson, Registrar and Collections Manager here at the National Quilt Museum. I'm joined today by our curator, Rachel Barr. People often ask us how we fold and store our quilts, so in today's video segment, we're going to show you how we do it here at the National Quilt Museum. When the quilts come down from the gallery or come out of storage, they come to this room here in Curatorial, and we lay them flat on these tables. To start the process of handling and storing our quilts, we always wash our hands to remove oils from our skins, and we wear white cotton gloves when we touch the quilt or anything that the quilt is touching. The quilts rest between two layers of clean cotton sheets. So we're going to pull the top layer off of this quilt. And we always lift up to move the sheets so that the surface of the fabric isn't dragging on the surface of the quilt. And the quilt that we're looking at today is called The Blade by Doreen Speckman. So we're going to actually fold this quilt and put it back into the box that we keep it in when it's not on display in the gallery. So to start with, I've pulled off two pieces of long tissue paper, and this is acid-free tissue paper. We use archival quality materials. When you're storing a quilt, you don't want to use regular tissue paper because it can release acids that can cause deterioration in the quilt. So I'll talk a little bit more about the tissue paper and the container we're going to use in just a moment. So to start with, we have the two long pieces of tissue paper that are about the same width as the quilt. We're going to twist them, and then where we place the tissue paper on the surface of the quilt depends on the size of our container. This is the box this quilt is going in today, so depending on what you use to store your quilt, you may fold it at different lengths or widths. So we know the dimensions of the boxes that we use, so we know basically how far in to place the tissue paper for our first fold. So we're going to bring this section of the quilt up and over the paper, and this is to create a curve instead of a hard crease in the fabric. If you don't have something here to support the quilt at its folds, it crushes those fibers, which can lead to deterioration or breaking of the fibers down the road. We'll twist our second piece and place it right at the edge of the quilt on the inside, and then go over that again. And then from this point forward, we'll continue to roll it or fold it. And for this quilt, you might be able to see here at the end, we've got the label outermost so that we can actually tell which quilt this is without actually having to unfold the entire quilt. So two smaller pieces of tissue paper, again twisted, will help us pad the quilt for the next fold. Let's bring it down the table just a little bit. So we'll lift up. And then I'll lift beneath the quilt, supporting all of its weight, and set it inside the box. We do have a little space in our box. This is a smaller size quilt. Ideally, you don't want a container that's too large, and you certainly don't want one that's too small. I already had a piece of tissue paper lining the bottom of the box. And now I'll add one to the top. And it's tucked in around all sides so that there is tissue paper between the entire surface of the quilt and the box itself. Our tissue paper is acid-free and unbuffered, and our boxes are acid-free, lignin-free, and buffered. So those terms mean a few different things. Buffered versus unbuffered, to start with. If something is buffered, it means that it has an alkaline substance added to it, like calcium carbonate, and that provides a buffer or a barrier against acids to help prevent deterioration. Most of the quilts that we have, and a lot of the quilts that people will have at home, are made of cotton fabrics. But some materials, like wool and silk, they should not be stored directly against a buffered material. So our tissue paper is unbuffered, because we have quilts that we might have quilts with mixed materials, or quilts that we don't actually know for sure if there are other materials besides cotton. We don't endorse any particular brand over another, but we do use Gaylord materials, Gaylord Archival, and if you're interested, we'll include a link with the information for the video to show you the materials that we buy and what we've used today. When you're deciding what container to store your quilt in, there are several factors to consider. You want chemical stability and physical stability. A box like this helps protect the quilt. It makes it easier to move around. You may not need to access your quilt very often, but you do want to take it out and refold it every so often, so that you're giving that fabric where it has previously been folded a chance to relax, and then you can fold it in different areas. Materials like plastic and wood are generally not safe for storage of textiles. They can give off acids, again, that can deteriorate the quilt, and you don't want to use any kind of tissue paper that isn't archival quality. If you don't have access to these kinds of materials, you can also use clean cotton sheeting. You want a cotton that isn't dyed, so we've got the white sheets here, and it does need to be washed, but you want to keep it as clean of chemicals as you can. And then something like this, we have a storage vault that we keep all our boxes in, but if you're going to put your quilt away for a long time, you may also want to consider wrapping it in plastic as a protection against leaks or flooding. To go back a little bit to when we were folding the quilt on the table, you notice that we started at one end and worked to the other. It isn't as important how wide your folds are as to where you put them. Most people tend to fold their quilts in halves and quarters, and so a lot of quilts often have very hard permanent creases along those lines. So anytime that you can avoid folding your quilt in halves and quarters, it's better. And then if you open up a quilt and you can see permanent creases, avoid folding them on those creases in the future. The National Quilt Museum is home to hundreds of beautiful works of fiber art, and preservation is a top priority for us. We know that people trust us to care for their works into the future, and we are happy to be able to provide a safe home for them. Look for more videos like this one in the future. For more information about how we care for our quilts, or for more tips and tricks on how to care for your own. Thank you.